Hello, my name is Zainab Saharwardi, and this is my final exam for Honors 1000 Changing Detroit. So for my agency that I chose, it is called Detroit Will Breathe. It is a movement on the streets of Detroit in the midst of an international movement against police brutality towards Black lives. So their main mission is to eliminate police brutality and change it and oppose all forms of systematic racism and exploitation. This movement came after the death of George Floyd, because as we know, back in March or April, during the time the coronavirus started, the Black Lives Matter movement also erupted with protests all over the country. And to be quite honest, living in the suburbs, living in Bloomfield Hills, I am not exposed to these protests or police brutality, so sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my head around how this is possible. I choose to avoid seeing, videos of, police dehumanizing Black people, basically, beating them up when they don't deserve it, taking innocent lives, and I really cannot comprehend how it's possible, but I know this is happening because of the protests, and I think the biggest thing that we noticed these days is what Will Smith said. It's not that, Black people are targeted more now. No, it's just that we're documenting it now. Before it wasn't. So back to Detroit Will Breathe. They have created a lot of changes, but what some of their demands are is defunding and demilitarizing the police, not carrying out eviction orders, not criminalizing homeless people, and a lot of other demands that they want. There's over 20 demands that they want to make, but one that I want to focus on is defunding and demilitarizing the police. A lot of people, when they think of police brutality and it being connected to Black lives, they think the solution for police brutality to end is defunding and demilitarizing the police. And I really don't support that, because if you get rid of law enforcement, how are you going to enforce the laws? How are you going to ensure that other people are not targeting Black people? Other races aren't fighting against each other. You can't stop, violence, destruction, without law enforcement. So I think this aspect of a lot of Black lives movements, when they say defunding and demilitarizing the police, that I don't support. I think for changing how the police are dealing with their cases is definitely with, body cameras and surveillance. And that's how we can target people if they are, committing crimes against Black people. For example, an organization called 1,000 Strong is in Detroit, and they want to educate men and women on not ending up in prison in undesirable situations. And then it's also, educating people on how to avoid this type of violence. And I think to change how the police are dealing with Black lives, we need to change how we are educating them. We need to have seminars because education is key. And without it, they're being ignorant, and these type of protests, these types of violence, crimes, they're still going to continue to happen. So let's talk about some of the accomplishments Detroit Will Breathe has made. They have overturned the racist and unjust 8 p.m. curfew imposed to squash protester rights. Because, there are protests going on every single day. They have brought scrutiny to the DPD for straining or overbearing, brutalizing protesters. And they have also helped a Black woman get free by exposing what law enforcement has swept under the rug, or they have helped in the release of a Black juvenile who went to jail for not doing his homework, which I think is completely blasphemous. And the Detroit Will Breathe movement has gotten a lot of momentum. They got together in 2020 to create this movement, and they have gotten Inner City and Idris Elba, a huge Hollywood actor, to help create a song called We All Move Together to highlight the changes that Detroit Will Breathe has made so far. And it talks about how Black people have united. Another way that they have really gained momentum is by their Twitter and Instagram. Their Instagram has over 28,000 followers. And I think that is quite amazing. I mean, they were made a couple of months ago, and they already have so many followers. Whatever protests that they're having, people are going to it. And a lot of other activists from other cities, such as Shabir Manji in Chicago or Joel Ibrahim and Lillian House in Denver, they have got together to discuss the state repression of the anti-racist movement and how to effectively counter it. A lot of the resistance that they're facing from their work is from the police department, actually. So the police chief criticizes the protesters for being manipulative because they're claiming that police brutality is, so horrible while ignoring their own actions by looting or throwing objects at the police, damaging vehicles, and the police chief really criticized Detroit Will Breathe because they're basically, in his words, doing the same thing to the police as they claim the police is doing to them, which I also think should not be right. But in an interview a couple of months ago, not an interview, but just on his Daily Show, Trevor Noah on the Daily Show, he was saying, and I thought this was really, eye-opening. He said that the reason that people are so angry, black people are looting and, putting fires in for storefronts or, doing all the stuff that they're doing is because the police, they were the ones to break the quote-unquote social contract. As a society, we have a contract, I respect you, you respect me, and they broke that. So the black people that are doing this, or not just black people, but the Black Lives Movement activists, not all activists, but some of the people that are doing it, he said that's why they feel that they should be able to do this, because the police were first to break the social contract. Now, if you look at it through KDK's lectures and the course concepts and his terminology, if you look at police brutality through the years, in 1967, there was a huge problem with police brutality. But then in Detroit, when we had our first black mayor, police brutality definitely gotten better. But in the last 5 years of the 20th century, the Detroit Police Department had gained a reputation for heavy use of force. And I think the reason for this is going back to what Will Smith said. He said, it's not that the cases just suddenly increased against black people. It's because they're being documented. And I think that is the reason why we see so many police brutality cases, and we hear about them, and the protests. And I think that is the reason why we need to solve this issue, as I said, by educating police officers, by having body cameras, by having surveillance, so we can avoid these type of situations, and putting whoever committed these crimes in prison for acting against, rights and humanity. So I think that the Detroit Will Breathe movement, they have, created a coalition. They have tried to make their work permanent. They've tried to work with the government by enforcing laws to help with Black lives. And this program, or this movement, I guess, it affects mostly people in Detroit, not really in the suburbs, because if you look at the maps, there aren't many cases where you see police brutality in Bloomfield Hills, for example. You don't see that. And even if you look on the map of where on the protest trails, where clashes are happening between the police and protesters, it's near Detroit. But it definitely affects hundreds of thousands of people, not just Black lives, but people of all colors. And then for part B, the organization that I found to help represent Detroit's interests and communities is the